In 1587, over 100 English settlers vanished without a trace. No bodies, no signs of struggle, only a single word carved into a tree: CROATOAN. What happened to the Roanoke Colony remains one of the greatest unsolved mysteries in American history. Was it a massacre, a secret migration, or something far stranger? The late 1500s were a time of conquest, rivalry, and dreams of empire. Spain had already staked its claim across vast stretches of the New World, reaping gold and glory. France and Portugal were not far behind, but England lagged in the race. Queen Elizabeth I was eager to change that. She needed a foothold in the Americas, a strategic base to challenge Spanish dominance and tap into the wealth rumored to lie across the Atlantic. Enter Sir Walter Raleigh, an ambitious courtier, explorer, and favorite of the Queen. In 1584, he received a royal charter to explore and colonize land in North America. He called it Virginia in honor of Elizabeth, the Virgin Queen. Raleigh's first task was clear: establish an English presence before Spain could tighten its grip. And so, plans were drawn, ships were loaded, and a small fleet set sail, carrying dreams, supplies, and the seeds of what would become one of history's deepest mysteries. The destination: a remote island off the coast of what is now North Carolina. Its name was Roanoke. The first English attempt to colonize Roanoke Island began in 1585. Led by Sir Richard Grenville and organized by Raleigh, a group of about 100 men landed on the island: soldiers, craftsmen, and sailors. But no women, no families. This was not yet a permanent home, it was a military outpost. At first, things went well. The English built a small fort and explored the nearby lands. They traded with local tribes, most notably the CROATOAN and the CROATOAN. But tension simmered beneath the surface. Mistrust grew. Cultural misunderstandings turned into conflict. Food became scarce. And by the time winter set in, the settlers were desperate. Their leader, Grenville, returned to England for supplies, promising to come back. But months passed, and no ships arrived. Then, in 1586, Sir Francis Drake happened to be sailing nearby after a raid in the Caribbean. He offered to take the starving colonists back to England. They didn't hesitate. Just weeks later, Grenville finally returned. Too late. He found the fort abandoned. No settlers remained. Only a skeleton crew stayed behind to maintain England's claim. Roanoke's first colony had failed. But Raleigh was not done yet. 2 years after the failure of the first colony, a new plan was put into motion. This time, it wouldn't be just soldiers. It would be families. Men, women, and children, ordinary people, sent to build a real settlement in the New World. The expedition was led by John White, a skilled artist and mapmaker. He was appointed governor of the new colony. Among the 115 settlers were his pregnant daughter, Eleanor Dare, and her husband. Their mission was ambitious: establish a permanent English presence in the Americas. The original destination was Chesapeake Bay, but the fleet's pilot, Simon Fernandez, had other plans. When they reached Roanoke, Fernandez refused to go any farther. He insisted they settle there, on the same island where the first colony had vanished just a year earlier. White protested, but it was no use. The settlers disembarked. They repaired the old fort. They planted crops, and they prepared to begin again. But from the start, the colony was on shaky ground. Supplies were limited. Relations with native tribes were strained. And within weeks it became clear they needed help from England. There was only one man who could get it: John White himself. Amid the tension and uncertainty, something remarkable happened. On August 18, 1587, Eleanor Dare gave birth to a daughter. She named her Virginia. Virginia Dare became the first English child born in the New World. To the settlers, it was a moment of hope, a sign that life could take root in this wild, distant land. To those back in England, her birth symbolized the beginning of a new era, an English America. But behind the joy was a growing sense of danger. Food was running low. The settlers were isolated, and there were whispers of hostility from neighboring tribes. With winter approaching and supplies dwindling, the colony made a decision. Someone had to return to England for help. John White was chosen. He was Virginia's grandfather. Leaving was the last thing he wanted to do. But without fresh supplies and reinforcements, the colony might not survive. In late 1587, just weeks after his granddaughter's birth, White boarded a ship and sailed back across the Atlantic. He promised to return quickly. No one could have guessed it would be the last time he'd see the colony alive. John White expected to return to Roanoke within a few months. But history had other plans. As he reached England, war erupted. Spain had launched the infamous Armada, an enormous fleet aimed at invading and conquering England. Every English ship was needed. Even civilian vessels were pressed into service. White pleaded for passage back to the colony, but no one would risk it. England was fighting for its survival. Months turned into a year, then 2, then 3. All the while, White could only wonder. Were the colonists still alive? Had his daughter survived? What had become of Virginia Dare, the first English child in the New World? Finally, in 1590, the war eased. White secured passage on a private expedition. They set sail across the Atlantic, hoping to reach Roanoke before it was too late. When they arrived, it was not the homecoming he had imagined. The settlement was silent. The buildings were gone. The fort was dismantled. There were no graves, no bones, no signs of battle. Only one chilling clue remained. When John White stepped ashore in 1590, he found a ghost town. Roanoke was deserted. Every trace of life had vanished. No settlers, no weapons, no signs of struggle or escape. Just an eerie, unsettling silence. But then, he noticed something. On one of the fort's posts, a single word was carved. CROATOAN. Nearby, the letters Kia were etched into a tree. There was no cross or distress signal, which the colonists had agreed to leave behind if they were forced to flee under threat. This suggested they had left willingly. White took it as a sign. The settlers had moved to CROATOAN Island, now known as Hatteras Island, home to a friendly native tribe. He wanted to sail there immediately. But once again, fate intervened. A storm battered the coastline. The ship's captain refused to risk the vessel. And with winter closing in, the crew turned back for England. John White never returned. He died without ever knowing what happened to his family. And the colony was never seen again. The disappearance of the Roanoke Colony sparked rumors almost immediately. England wanted answers, but all they had was a word carved into wood, and silence. Some believed the colonists were attacked and wiped out by hostile tribes, but no signs of violence were ever found. No bodies, no remains, nothing to suggest a massacre. Others thought they tried to sail back to England themselves, perhaps building a small boat and vanishing at sea. But that too left no trace. The most enduring theory was that they had joined the CROATOAN tribe. The settlers may have moved inland, intermarried, and assimilated into native culture. Some later explorers reported seeing blue-eyed children in native villages, but no hard proof ever surfaced. Then came the more bizarre theories, that they were captured by the Spanish, that they were victims of starvation or disease and buried their dead, that they migrated south and perished in the swamps. And some even whispered of curses, lost civilizations, or supernatural forces. Stories passed down through generations, blurring the line between history and legend. For centuries, the fate of Roanoke remained one of America's oldest cold cases. And it was far from closed. Over the centuries, many have tried to solve the mystery of Roanoke. Historians, archaeologists, treasure hunters, even conspiracy theorists. Excavations on Roanoke Island have uncovered English tools, pottery shards, and metal objects. But most of these likely belonged to the first 1585 expedition, not the lost colony of 1587. The real question was, where did the final group go? In the early 2000s, archaeologists began searching farther south on Hatteras Island, once called CROATOAN. There they discovered a mix of European and Native American artifacts. Copper rings, iron tools, parts of a rapier, a type of European sword. The evidence hinted at a blending of cultures. Perhaps some of the settlers had joined the CROATOAN people, living and surviving together. But once again, no documents, no names, no graves. Then in 2012, researchers analyzed a 16th century map drawn by John White himself. Beneath a patch, they found a hidden symbol, a small fort, drawn in invisible ink. It pointed to a location inland, near the Chowan River. Could the colonists have split up, some going south, others west? Teams began digging near the marked site. They found signs of English presence. But still, no smoking gun, no clear proof. Just more shadows in a centuries-old mystery. Of all the theories surrounding the lost colony, one stands above the rest. The idea that the settlers were not killed, but absorbed. The CROATOAN people lived on an island just 50 miles south of Roanoke. They had once been allies of the English. They knew the settlers. They traded with them, and they may have offered shelter when survival on Roanoke became impossible. The word Croto, carved into the post, was not a mystery, it was a message. A clue left behind by the colonists to say, "This is where we went." Years later, English explorers and traders described encounters with native tribes who spoke broken English. Some wore European clothing. Some claimed to have ancestors who were white. There were even rumors of native children with gray eyes and light hair. But no one ever found a surviving settler. No diaries. No artifacts bearing names. No trace of Eleanor Dare or Virginia. If they were absorbed into native society, they vanished without a word, becoming part of a culture that left little in the way of written history. Some historians believe this theory explains everything. Others say it leaves too much unanswered. Because when you follow the trail of Roanoke, it always ends in silence. More than 400 years have passed, and still the mystery of Roanoke endures. No other colonial disappearance has captured the imagination quite like this one. It was America's first ghost story, and it never left. Virginia Dare became a symbol, first of promise, then of loss. Roanoke's fate has been written into novels, television, even horror anthologies. But despite all the fiction, the real story remains a void. Generations of researchers have followed leads across islands, rivers, and ancient tribal lands. They found fragments, pieces of metal, broken pottery, a few strange symbols, but no final answer. It's as if the colony simply dissolved, erased by time, by nature, or by quiet survival. There is no graveyard, no farewell, only a single word, carved into a post, and left behind like a whisper: CROATOAN.